Welcome to Madlik. My name is Geoffrey Stern, and at Madlik we light a spark or shed some light on a Jewish text or tradition. Along with Rabbi Mintz, we host Madlik Disruptive Torah on Clubhouse and share it as the Madlik podcast on your favorite platform. This week's Torah portion is Tzav, but since Passover will be soon upon us, we continue our exploration of Haggadot that break with the past. Today we will focus on Kibbutz Haggadot, which were written for the most part by secular Jews who had a deep understanding of Jewish texts and traditions. In these Haggadot, these self-proclaimed new Jews reimagine the message of the Seder and inspire us to do the same. So join us for the Protest Haggadah continued. Well, welcome back, Rabbi, and it's so amazing that you were in Israel over the last week. Israel is always the center of the universe, but these days a little more so.
More so this past week, that is for sure, right.
So last week we looked at some Haggadot that were really protest Haggadot. They were written by the so-called Black Panthers in the 70s in Israel. We saw Haggadot that were written in the first DP camps coming out of the Holocaust at really pivotal moments. And we ended on a note from the Holocaust DP camp Haggadah that was talking about all the divisions within the Jewish people and how the shlichim came and tried to grab each of these survivors to their own party. And it ended up saying that really all this diversity is good. It prepares the ground for all kinds of beliefs so that people can go and die for the tip of every letter in their own Torah. So we ended on a note that there really are many Torahs. We all write our own Torah. And so I like, no matter what we're talking about, to tie our discussion to the parsha. And this parsha begins in Leviticus 6, and it talks, as the rest of the book of Leviticus will, about sacrifices. And it says, this is the ritual of the burnt offering, Zot Torat Ha'olah. And Rashi explains, because it's really, in a sense, you can always sense that it's a different use of the word Torah. It's not referring to the 5 books of Moses. It's not referring to Revelation. And he says, Shekol Torah l'rabot huba, that the word Torah can be used to really talk about a group of laws. If I will have a little literary license, I would say to talk about a Weltanschauung, an approach to something. And the truth is that even in Samuel 2, you have this word, V'zot Torah ta'adam, that there are rules of a person. And we have the most famous of all in Mishlei, in Proverbs, and it says that, my son, heed the discipline of your father, v'al titosh torati mecha, but do not forsake the instruction of your mother. So I really do believe that one of the things that we will see today is that you really can have a different Torah, a different whole direction, and it is part of this discussion, and we don't always have to be pinned down to a precise corpus. I think one of the surprising things that I found when I prepared this week was I actually learned Torah from these secular Jews on the kibbutzim. Rabbi, have you ever seen a kibbutz Haggadah? I became infatuated with them about 5-10 years ago, and I have a little collection.
That's great that you have a collection. I have seen them. I'll just tell you on something that's kind of connected one step away. I'm reading a book now called The Jews of Summer, written by a professor. Her name is Sandra Fox. I don't know if you went to summer camp growing up. Did you go to summer camp growing up?
Yes, I did. Yes.
And part of the book describes the following. You know, many of the camps, they were Zionist camps, they were Yiddishist camps, they were not religious camps, conservative camps, reform camps. You know, Orthodox camps were only one little piece of the puzzle. And with what she describes in the book, she has an entire chapter about how they rethought. There's only one holiday in the summer, that's Tisha B'Av. How the Reform and the conservative Jews, the secular Jews, rethought Tisha B'Av in a way that made sense to them. And I thought about that in regard to the Kibbutz Haggadot. They don't reject the tradition, they reframe the tradition. I think that's a wonderful Jewish trait.
And I have to say that one of my pleas last week was this. We are going through a moment in history, and my God, we need Haggadah written, and I called it the Protest Haggadah. And sure enough, I shared this with you.
Came around this afternoon.
This afternoon, it's called Haggadah HaCherut, but if you look at the PDF, the name of the file is Haggadah Macha'ah, which literally means a protest Haggadah. But before you all rush out to get it, and I what I hope to do is if they don't translate it, I hope to put together a Sephira sheet that has all of the translations in it. They really didn't touch the traditional Haggadah. They have little articles, from famous thought leaders and poets and songwriters and political leaders. They did not touch the traditional Haggadah. And what we are going to do today is to see what these first-generation Jews who came out of all of the richness of a Jewish culture, they were totally itinerant Jews who knew all of the sources, and they rewrote to a large degree the Haggadah. So let's jump right in. I really suggest that you go to the Sephira source sheet because I have images of the Haggadot. But the first Haggadah that we look at actually begins by quoting the verses HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chadashim. We celebrated Parshat HaChodesh about 2 weeks ago, and it literally is the first commandment, and it says, "This month shall be you the first of all the years, Rishon hu lechem lechodshei hashana," and then it says that it is in the spring. And what all of the Kibbutz Haggadot do, no big surprise, they're all agricultural communals, is literally celebrate the spring. And I had always seen that, I think it kind of works its way into some of our Haggadot, where you have verses from Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, and I'm not even going to quote those because those seem to be so obvious. But it literally, all of them start with a celebration of spring. And in this one, it then brings a piece of Talmud I had never heard of before. It says, Kol ha'olam kulo omer Hallel. The whole world says Hallel. Ki balayla ze otzrot talilim nitfachim. Because tonight the treasuries of dew are open. And I had never really seen that expression. Through the magic of Sephira, you can put a few words from any phrase into Sephira, and lo and behold, it comes from Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer 32. And it has an amazing story, that when we all know the story of how the birthright of Jacob was given to Isaac and not Esau. And it rewrites, or I should say reimagines that story as having happened on the night of the Seder. And we have the old Isaac saying to his son Esau, "Tonight the heavenly ones utter songs." Not a great translation. It really is the same one we had in the Haggadah. Tonight the whole world is saying Hallel. On this night the treasures of dew are opened. On this the blessings of the dew. So he asks him to bring him savory meat. He wants the Passover sacrifice. Rebecca hears about this. She delays Esau, and she gives Jacob the right on this. And she says to Jacob, "On this night the treasures of dew will be opened, and on this night the angels utter a song. Make savory meat for thy father, that he may eat while he still lives to bless thee." So I had never heard of this midrash, and so I throw up my hands already, and I say, so these Kibbutz Haggadot and the writers of them knew their Torah, and they bring this beautiful story about passing on the blessing literally on the night of Passover. Had you realized that, Rabbi?
No, it's very good. No, it's very, very good. I did not realize that.
So then it goes and it starts talking about the dew, and it has tal. And, again, you could assume this is a beautiful poem about tal. But for those of us who spend a lot of time in synagogue around the holidays, we know that on the first day, I believe, of Yom Tov, you have Tfilat Tal.
And that's important to say, right? Meaning tal is not it's not just related to spring. We actually say tfilat tal.
We say it, and the kibbutzniks put this into the Haggadah because they realized, again, they were accentuating the connection between the spring and the birth of the new nation. So we already have now with Jacob giving the blessing or getting the blessing, the birth of the nation the first time. And then we have in the Tfilat Tal words like Tichadesh Yameinu, rejuvenate our days, Ta'amud Shemenu, reaffirm our name. In other words, give us. It talks about Kuma Ir Bochavtzacha Betal, reestablish, presumably Jerusalem, the city of your desire through dew. So now already through bringing in this this prayer of the dew, they're bringing in our homeland, our country, our capitals, our name and self-appreciation of ourselves. It's so amazing that they're adding things, but they're taking from our rich tradition to the Haggadah that is already telling the story in a new way of the rebirth of the Jewish people.
It's amazing, and you didn't mention the fact that on the side there are instructions. Mikra means to read, and Makela means that the choir would sing it. And on the bottom, it's called Makelat Yiladim. So they actually had a children's choir, so that everybody participated in this.
And it looks like this particular Haggadah is from Mishmar HaSharon, is a kibbutz in central Israel. To give you an idea, it was started in 1924 by 10 Russian immigrants who were later joined by immigrants from Poland. It was agricultural. It was the birthplace of Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak. And more importantly, and I've been to this kibbutz, it is the home to Ulpan Mishmar HaSharon, which is, and I visited it because we have a donor who gave $1 million to fix up this Ulpan because he was a misbehaving teen in Canada, and his parents said, we got to get him out of the house. They sent him to this Ulpan. It changed around his life, and now he's giving back. But when you ask the kibbutz why they do it, they say it's our gift to the Medina. It's our gift to our country. It's how we contribute. I mean, I went there and I felt I was back 40 years. They have one Beit Knesset there. I said, do you have another? And he looked at me like I just screamed fire in a theater. He goes, no, we have one Beit Knesset.
Do they still eat together? Does everybody eat in a Chadar Ochel?
Yes, he says, let's have lunch first and then we'll tour. And I got online with my tray and had lunch in the Chadar Ochel.
And everybody eats together.
Absolutely. So what I'm getting at is that this Haggadah, if you can see the source sheet, it was written on a typewriter. It was mimeographed. I mean, this was something that you can see a council putting together, and it's real Torah here. It's made me think about the Haggadah in a new way. It made me discover Pikei Durab Eliezer and to look at Tfilat Tal in a new way. Because I have to...
somebody knew all of that to put it together. And that's really impressive.
Well, absolutely. And I think a lot of times we think of spring with regard to the Haggadah as a bug, not a feature, as they say in software. But for the kibbutzniks, it was the critical message. And so I have another picture from the Haggadah of Shomer HaTzeir, and they were the Marxists, Zionists, the youth movements, and they start also HaChodesh Hazeh. And then they talk about the new year starting with Nisan in the spring. And again, all they're doing really is quoting traditional sources and setting the stage for what is to follow. It's truly amazing, and I only have maybe 4 or 5 Kibbutz Haggadot. This theme, this way of beginning the Seder and celebrating it, tying it to, we'll see the land, but certainly tying it to the spring and horticulture, was universal for the kibbutznikim, and I think totally founded on tradition.
Yeah, I mean, all that's true, but relevant to them, because on the kibbutz, the change of season was much more important even than it is in the city.
But you can almost turn that statement around and say, how can you actually, not only how can you celebrate the Seder outside of Israel, but how can you celebrate the Seder outside of being tied to the land? I mean, they make such a strong point that it really becomes part and parcel of the story. So the next thing that they all seem to do, and they've taken this from traditional Judaism, is to have what I would call a kavanah, or an intention, or an invocation. So one of the Haggadahs says, Hinei muchan u'mezuman l'kayim mitzvot, here it is, I am prepared and focused to fulfill the commandment, aseh u'lesaper b'yetziat Mitzrayim, to the mitzvot, I say, the positive commandment to tell the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, yachad im kol Yisrael. So there's no mention of God, there's mention of the Jewish people, that we are doing this commandment. They've kept the concept of a positive commandment. And what they've connected it to is Klal Yisrael. Again, something beautiful. They could have easily gotten rid of this sense of obligation, this sense of you have to, are obligated to do something. They didn't. They kept it. I love that too.
Yeah, I mean, it's really so interesting. I mean, what you really want, Geoffrey, is you want to be in that room where they compose this Haggadah. Because obviously they composed it in the kibbutz, right? As you said, it was created on a typewriter. There were a group of people who wrote it together, and that's what's so great.
So that last one was from Naut Mordechai, which is a kibbutz, the home of Teva Naot, a shoe factory, branches all over Israel. We've heard of these kibbutzim, and each one, the populations have dwindled. You're talking about 600 people in each one of these kibbutzim, but you're absolutely correct. You can almost see them sitting around a table, not planning their harvest and not planning how the kids are going to be educated, but planning the Haggadah and throwing stories around and midrashim and prayers from their youth. So in the Shomer HaTzeir, Hineni, the Kavanah, it says, and again, it harkens to what I was talking about last year, that there's almost not only a license to be mechadesh, to be innovative here, there's almost a commandment, because it says, B'kol dor vador chayev adam le'ot et atzmo, that every generation we have to see ourselves as coming out of our Egypt. So maybe we have to find our pharaohs, and we have to find our Egypts and our promised lands. So here it says, Kigam anu yotzanu mebeit avadim, because we also, now we're talking to the rest of the kibbutznikim, who are survivors possibly, who have come from the four corners of the world. We are linidche Yisrael al admasam. We are the scattered of Israel back on our land. And therefore it says, and here's a beautiful innovation, it says, Al kein yached laila zeh, therefore let us dedicate this night, mikol halelot, from all of the other nights, for Narbel Saper Bo Mietziat Mitzrayim, and to talk about the story of going out from Egypt, Beviat Yisrael Biyamim Hahem Biyamenu Anu Bizmanim Hahem Ubizman Hazer. So picking up on the concept that we say every Hanukkah, that we celebrate now for something that happened then, Biyamim Hahem Bizman Hazer, that's how they interpret that we have to literally, and it was easy for them to see as themselves coming out of Egypt and into a new promised land. But I love that innovation as well.
Yeah, no. And the fact that they, again, take the tradition and apply it to them, that's the way they feel. Now, these kibbutzim, these are people who came from Europe, right? Mostly before the Holocaust, right? These are people who came on the Aliyah. And it was very difficult. I have to tell you this, you know this, right? It was very difficult living in Israel then. Very, very difficult. And they were making a tremendous sacrifice. And to live in a kibbutz was really difficult. And that in the early kibbutzim, the children didn't even sleep with the parents. So it was a whole different kind of socialist view. And they see themselves as really being freed and committed to doing to building the land. It's really it's so positive. You and I were talking before about this week in Israel and how the peaceful the power of peaceful protests. And you think about these people who, they were, like you said in the Haggadah, Haggadat Macha'ah, they were really making a statement about what the future of the state of Israel was going to be like.
Absolutely. And how they say it. So the next one from Mishma HaSharon, it says, Savri, Nikvatzei Goliot. Savri, we all know Savri. We say it before we say Birchat Hamazon. It's this welcome. It says, Savri to those gathered from exile. Let us sanctify, my comrades and my leaders, this holiday of Pesach. Let us raise our hearts the memory of the holy ones, the fighters who established Israel in our land. Bless the pioneers of our people that immigrated, that prepared the way and built the earth that was barren, and renewed for us a holidays of joy, festivals and times of celebration. This holiday of freedom, a commemoration of the exodus from Egypt. And then it says, Kol haneshama tehalelia, kol haneshama tehalelia. The seamlessness with which it blends this renewal of the land, the renewal of spring, the ingathering of the exiled. It's so powerful. It's so beautiful. And they were telling all of the children in their kibbutz their own story.
Yeah, no, I mean that you said it. It was their story. It was the story of the Exodus, but it was their story. And it really required tremendous creativity by somebody in the kibbutz who was able to put these things together. I'm really fascinated by that. I would love someone to write an article about who actually wrote these Haggadot. What was their background? How'd they know so much? Geoffrey, you found that Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer because we have Sfaria, and you know how to put in those words, and it popped up Sfaria. But how'd they find that before the days of Sfaria?
I think this was part of their upbringing.
It was part of their culture, which means that even though they were secular in the kibbutz, but they had some background. Whatever that story was, they had some background. That's also interesting.
So I have to say, I mentioned earlier that there is a Haggadah that just came out, published by the protesters, but it leaves the original, traditional text of the Haggadah 100% intact. And to me, that's a metaphor of giving to the traditional rabbis, call them Haredim, call them religious Zionists, give them the realm of religion. We'll write a commentary. But these kibbutzniks felt literate enough. They owned their tradition. They, as you say, Rabbi, is it a protest? I don't really know, because I don't know if they cared what anybody else thought about them. But they were harvesting their traditions for their Seder. Now, in the Haggadah that just came out, it's all kind of commentary on the side. The next thing that I'm going to read, I don't know whether it's a prayer or it's a commentary, because it's all written in Hebrew. For me, it feels like it's part and parcel of the Haggadah, but maybe it's narration. Here's what it says. You do not have a record of historical recognition more profound than this. And you do not have a confluence of the individual and the society in the widest sense of the globe of the world, and the depths of the generations larger than this ancient pedagogic imperative. He's talking about the Haggadah. I do not know of a literary creation that teaches a loathing for subjugation more than this, and a love for freedom comparable to this story of enslavement and exodus from Egypt. And I do not know of any historical narrative that is so totally directed toward welcoming the future, that is so totally a symbol of a vision and to our future, such as the memory of the exodus from Egypt. Such a deep desire for freedom embedded in the heart of a nation in the spring of its days, to create a brilliant creation like this and to transfer it from generation to generation. You have to read it in the Hebrew. I have never heard someone speak with so much love and respect for our traditions as this kibbutznik.
I mean, that's an amazing thing, because he's really saying that our experience is their experience. He's drawing a straight line from the Exodus in Egypt 3,500 years ago to the experience in the kibbutz, right?
Yeah.
And that's an amazing thing. I mean, the truth of the matter is that one of the paragraphs in the Haggadah says, B'chol dor vador, chayav adam lirot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim. In every generation, you need to feel as if you yourself left Egypt. So the truth is that that's the challenge for each one of us, to make it feel as if we left Egypt. Now, we fall short on that, because how many people feel as if we left Egypt? How many people feel as if our year was Egypt and now finally we're free? We don't really feel that way. But it's really, in a sense, it's so encouraging to read these Kibbutz Haggadot written by basically Jews who had, adopted something other than traditional religion, but they connect so much to this idea of the Exodus, and they see their experience as an experience of freedom. Now, that's an interesting thing, because the kibbutz is actually the opposite of freedom, because the kibbutz had a lot of rules, but they embraced the rules, so they felt as if they were free. Right? There's a lot to be said about that, to analyze the kibbutz kind of mentality.
But you picked up on that thing that I said a second ago, where it said mitzvot aseh. It's a positive commandment. They knew what commandments and obligations were.
That's what I'm saying. They know exactly what that is, right? And they draw that direct line. And what it sounds to me, if I had to write a story about it, is that these people in the kibbutz, had traditional backgrounds. They gave that up. They adopted the kibbutz. But when it came to Pesach, they felt the need, the desire to combine the tradition of their youth and the reality of where they were now. And I think that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And that's really a model. And I want to tell you something, Geoffrey, that when I speak on Pesach, I'm going to use some of this material from these Haggadot, because this stuff, you cannot make this stuff up. This stuff is amazing. You can't find this stuff anywhere. So I give you a lot of credit for finding this material.
Thank you. So the only thing, and I think we might be saying the same thing, I don't, because of the moment in history that these people were, I don't think they were reclaiming their Judaism and taking the traditional Haggadah and picking and choosing from it. I think they were writing their Haggadah. I think that they felt that they were the fulfillment of 2,000 years of Jewish history, and they were carrying those traditions with them. And if anything, and we discussed this last week a little bit with some of the pictures of the four sons, they were the wise son, and the people with the payos who were still living in medieval times were the ones who didn't know how to ask a question.
Yeah,
didn't know how to challenge themselves. So let me read just a few more. Here is from another Haggadah from Ner Rechovot. It says, "We were slaves in every generation and in all places. We were scattered between the nations. We were choked in the darkness of the diaspora. For millenniums we were subjugated. In every corner of the earth we knew not rest, and our lives were dependent on our enemies. And we looked at the land that was under our feet, and it was like iron, and the heavens that were above our heads, and they were like copper. And it was like a threatening shadow to all the nations on the land. And we cried to the Lord our God, and he did not answer. And we carried it in the depths of our hearts, the wrath and fury of our sins, and the glory of our hope from generation to generation." Now listen. "And now, behold, we have risen to cast off from us the yoke of the exile, and to make for us a new land and new heavens, with a mighty hand and a steady arm, to find a resting place for our weary feet, and to renew our covenant with the land and with the plants. And great is the path in front of us." This kind of combines all of those themes that we've been talking to. They pick up on the language of a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, and lo and behold, it's their hand. It's the hand of the chalutz. They pick up on the concept of renewing the covenant, and it's again with the land and with the horticulture. It's just so strong, the biblical references to the earth that is iron and the skies that are copper. It's all there, and it's telling their story. And I wish if I was sitting around a Seder, whether it's in Israel today or here, that our children have to hear our story of how we came to be identifying Jews, how we came, I think now I'm thinking of Israel, they have to appreciate, yes, these kibbutzniks, they had rules. Some of the children who grew up in this kibbutzim feel that they need psychiatry and help. But ultimately, and there were a lot more Ashkenazim on the kibbutzim, there were a lot of faults, no question about it. But they did create this land, and it was thoughtful, and they were 10 Jews from Odessa that came, and they shivered, and they gave their lives. We have to tell our story, because we can't come together and do what we need to do in terms of appreciating the other's story unless we can celebrate our own also.
And I mean, of course, that's right. And I would just add to that, that they connect their story to the text of the Haggadah. Biyad Chazakah, right? The Yad Chazakah is their Yad Chazakah. That's a great medrash, which they made up themselves. They didn't need the rabbis to make it up. That's a medrash. And that's actually the good way to end. That's really our challenge at the Seder. Can we write our own Haggadah? This is what you talked about with Rabbi Bronstein last week. Can we write our own Haggadah? And I want to wish everybody a Chag Sameach. And Geoffrey, this is the perfect way to go into it. Our wish to everybody is that you write your own Haggadah, that you connect the traditions to our lives and to our challenges. And we look forward to hearing from you. If you want to share some of your ideas with us, we'd love to hear from everybody. So Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Chag Sameach. And
thank you so much, Rabbi. Chag Kosher v'Sameach. You're going to be where?
We're going to be in Portofino, Italy.
Okay, so any of our listeners who find themselves in Portofino, Italy,
call me up. I'm looking forward to learning with all of you. Be well, everybody. Chag Sameach.
Chag Kosher v'Sameach. So, my friends, my family, I tell you, I have so much more material here. I'm going to go through it kind of quickly because I am just so in love with these Haggadot. You know, most of what they've done is just quote selectively. One of them quotes from Ezekiel, the bones coming alive. You'd think that would be the last thing that a secular Jew would quote, the miraculous story of the bones coming back to life. But guess what? It wasn't miraculous to these Jews. They saw it with their own eyes. They talk about the midrashim that we have discussed in the past. If you recall, when we had a podcast called High Five, and we talked about chamushim, which is the 5 fingers, also meant arms. Hey, guess what? The kibbutznikim didn't have to hear the podcast. You'll see they quoted it, Chamushim olu b'nei Yisrael. They quote both of the verses. Then they say, Biyad Ramah, with a high hand, we came out. They are, in a sense, celebrating the military victory. They quote the midrash that we found in a footnote from Pseudo-Philo about there were 3 groups of Jews at the Red Sea, or the Sea of Reeds. One of them says, let's just jump into the sea and give up. The other said, let's go back into Egypt. And the third one says, let us fight. And they all celebrate that.
Be back 60 years, because I lived in Israel in 1970, or no, it was 60, maybe 50 years ago. And I lived on a kibbutz during Pesach. And I'm telling you, it was one of the most incredible. I now think about what I saw, and it was the most celebrated and special holidays, because these kibbutzniks brought the land into the equation, and they were proud of themselves, and they were liberated, and it made Pesach so different than what I had ever experienced, and I remember that today.
Wow. Well, that just confirms what I was finding on the pages, and you can go on YouTube and find stuff in Hebrew, but it's so richly connected to the land. The other thing that I found in every single one of the Haggadot from the kibbutzim, some of them celebrated the military might the way the one that I just quoted did, but all of them create quote that midrash where the angels want to sing a song when the Jews have come through the split Red Sea, and God says, Ma'aseh yedei tovim b'yam v'atem omrim shira lefanai. God says, the creations of my hands are drowning in the water, in the sea, and you want to sing my praises or Hallel. They were not pacifists by any means, but they were looking for peace, in a sense that midrash that they brought, where you have Esau and Jacob, both preparing the Passover sacrifice. They all have this midrash that, if you would have asked me, because we all know it in the States, was probably introduced by some reform or conservative humanist. But they were humanists, clearly. But it was all in every one of these Haggadot, and certainly these people had plenty of reason to have bitterness against their enemies. But the Shomer HaTzeir brings the Isaiah verses about the lamb lying down with the lion. So it's the verses that they pick from our tradition. These people were not going to elsewhere for their inspiration. They owned Judaism. And that, I believe, is one of the things that has happened in Israel from the day maybe that you were at the Seder, and where they were using Haggadot like this, to where we are today, when the movement that is protesting in the streets takes a traditional Haggadah and puts commentary on the side. They don't seem to have the tools or the desire to actually own the Haggadah. And I was thinking recently, if in America one was to outlaw all other forms of Judaism besides Orthodoxy, and 20 years later you would come back and you would say it's a wasteland out there, would you really be surprised that it was a wasteland? You have pictures of these kibbutzim where they had to have a rabbi from the Rabbanut come and officiate at their weddings in order to make it official. And after reading these Haggadot, you say to yourself, that's absurd. Why would they need to reach out from anywhere else in terms of doing a Jewish tradition? If they can do the Haggadah and the Seder, they can take care of rites of passage. It's really such a fascinating exploration. And I would say that, rather than try to import into Israel American and West European forms of Judaism, I think they just have to look back into their own very rich history. They have to look back to their grandparents who came with that rich history to this country and rebuild it from there and take ownership of it and say, no one's going to take my Judaism away from you. They have beautiful poems by Bialik that I encourage you to read. Anyway, I just was tied up with this all week because these Haggadot, I'm fortunate to have the originals in my hand, to feel them, to touch them, to look at the graphics. Some of them are calligraphied. Some of them are written on a mimeograph machine. It's just so, so inspiring. So I hope I shared with you a little bit of that inspiration and that we can all use it to inspire ourselves to rediscover our Judaism and to reinvent and rejuvenate our Judaism at this festival, after all, of spring and rebirth.